Standing in the East Room of the White House wearing a borrowed navy dress that didn't quite fit right, I couldn't stop my hands from trembling as President Martinez approached the podium. The crystal chandeliers cast warm light across the faces of distinguished guests, cabinet members, and media representatives who had gathered for what the press secretary called, recognizing extraordinary contributions to American innovation. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. Growing up in Millbrook Falls, Oregon, I learned early that being different wasn't celebrated in the Henderson household. My father, Robert Henderson, managed the local hardware store his grandfather had established in 1952. My mother, Patricia, taught 4th grade at Millbrook Elementary for 31 years. They believed in predictable paths, good grades, college degrees in practical subjects, stable jobs with benefits, marriage by 25, and grandchildren by 30. My older brother Marcus followed this blueprint perfectly. He studied accounting at Portland State, married his college girlfriend Sarah 2 weeks after graduation, and landed a position at a respected firm downtown. My younger sister Emma pursued nursing, exactly as our mother had suggested, and was already engaged to her high school sweetheart by age 22. Then there was me. While Marcus organized his textbooks by color and Emma practiced perfectly neat handwriting, I spent hours in our basement workshop tinkering with broken electronics. Our neighbor, Mrs. Chen, would bring me discarded radios, old television sets, and malfunctioning kitchen appliances. I'd spread the components across newspaper-covered tables, studying circuits and connections with the intensity other kids reserved for video games. My parents tolerated this hobby until middle school, when it began interfering with what they considered real priorities. During 8th grade parent-teacher conferences, Mrs. Davidson mentioned my exceptional aptitude for mathematics and suggested advanced placement courses. Instead of pride, my father expressed concern. "Claire needs to focus on well-rounded development," he told Mrs. Davidson while I sat in the plastic chair beside him. "These technical interests are fine for boys, but girls need practical skills for real careers." That evening at dinner, as Emma described her successful science fair presentation on plant growth, I excitedly explained my project involving solar panel efficiency improvements. I'd spent weeks calculating optimal angles and testing different materials to maximize energy capture. The prototype I'd built using salvaged components had outperformed commercial panels in several key metrics. Marcus barely looked up from his meatloaf. "That's nice, Claire, but when are you going to work on something useful, like improving your writing scores?" Emma nodded sympathetically. "Maybe you could do something easier next time, like baking soda volcanoes." My mother reached across the table to pat my hand. "Honey, it's wonderful that you enjoy playing with gadgets, but you should focus on subjects that will help you get into a good teaching program. Education is a stable career for women." My father set down his fork with authority. "Your mother's right, this electronics thing is just a phase. You need to start thinking about practical goals." High school brought new challenges and deeper family disappointment. While my classmates joined traditional clubs like drama and student government, I convinced Mr. Rodriguez, the physics teacher, to let me start an engineering club. We met after school in his classroom, where I taught interested students basic circuit design and introduced them to programming concepts I'd learned through online tutorials. Our first major project involved designing energy-efficient lighting systems for the school's greenhouse. Working with a team of 6 students, we developed LED arrays that reduced power consumption by 40% while increasing plant growth rates. The local newspaper featured our project, and the school district implemented our design across 3 additional facilities. I rushed home with the newspaper clipping, certain my family would finally understand my passion's value. I found them in the living room watching the evening news. "Look," I said, spreading the newspaper across the coffee table. "We made the front page of the community section." My mother glanced at the article briefly. "That's nice, dear. But did you remember to submit your college applications? The deadline for the education program is approaching." Marcus examined the photo showing our team standing beside the greenhouse installation. "This is pretty cool, Claire, but what's your backup plan?" Engineering is incredibly competitive, and most people who try it end up changing majors anyway. Emma looked up from her nursing textbook. Plus, wouldn't it be lonely being one of the only girls in those classes? I heard engineering students barely have time for social lives. My father folded the newspaper and handed it back to me. We're proud of your school activities, but remember that hobbies and careers are different things. You need to choose a path that guarantees stability. Despite their concerns, I applied to Oregon State University's electrical engineering program. My grades were excellent. My SAT scores placed me in the top 5% nationally, and my portfolio showcased dozens of innovative projects. The acceptance letter arrived on a Tuesday in March, along with notification of a partial academic scholarship. I found my family eating lunch in the kitchen when I opened the envelope. My hands shook as I read the acceptance letter aloud, my voice growing stronger with each word about course requirements, research opportunities, and the program's reputation for innovation. Silence stretched across the kitchen when I finished reading. Finally, my mother spoke carefully. "Congratulations, honey. But have you really thought this through? Engineering programs are designed for a certain type of person." "What type of person?" I asked. Marcus answered before she could respond. "You know, people who are naturally good at math and science. Really good, not just good for Millbrook Falls." "I am good at math and science," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Emma reached across the table. "Of course you are, Claire. But college is different from high school. The competition is much harder, and engineering specifically attracts students who've been preparing their whole lives." My father leaned back in his chair, adopting the tone he used when explaining why certain household rules existed. "We've seen too many kids get excited about unrealistic goals, struggle for a few years, then end up with debt and no useful skills. Your mother and I want better for you." "The teaching program at Portland State has an excellent reputation," my mother added. "You could still take some science courses as electives, best of both worlds." I looked around the table at 3 people who claimed to love me but couldn't see past their own limitations. "I'm going to study engineering," I said quietly. Marcus shook his head. "Claire, be realistic. Look at your competition. Those programs are filled with kids who built computers in elementary school and won national science competitions. Kids whose parents are engineers and doctors. Kids from places like Silicon Valley and Boston." "You're setting yourself up for disappointment," Emma said gently. "Why not choose something you know you can succeed at?" My father's final words on the subject came as I stood to leave the kitchen. "We'll support whatever decision you make, Claire. But don't say we didn't warn you when this engineering dream doesn't work out." That night, I sat in my bedroom holding the acceptance letter and staring at my wall of project photos. Solar panel prototypes, LED lighting systems, a small wind turbine I'd built for the school's sustainability fair, circuit boards I'd designed to control automated watering systems. Each photo represented hours of research, experimentation, failure, and eventual success. But my family saw only a girl playing with gadgets, destined for disappointment when she encountered real challenges. I made my decision that night not despite their doubts, but because of them. If they couldn't believe in my abilities, I'd have to believe enough for all of us. The next morning, I mailed my acceptance confirmation to Oregon State University. 3 weeks later, at my high school graduation ceremony, I was recognized as the recipient of the Regional Excellence in Mathematics and Science Award. As I walked across the stage to accept the plaque, I searched the audience for my family's faces. They were there, politely applauding, but I could see the worry in their expressions, even from the stage. After the ceremony, as other families gathered for celebration photos and congratulatory hugs, my mother pulled me aside. "We're proud of you, Claire," she said, "but promise me you'll keep an open mind about changing majors if engineering doesn't work out. There's no shame in recognizing when something isn't the right fit." I promised, knowing even then that I'd never need to keep that promise. College began 3 months later, and with it, the real test of whether a girl from a small Oregon town could compete with students from across the country. My family's doubts followed me to campus like shadows, whispering questions about my capabilities during every challenging problem set and difficult exam. But those doubts also fueled something they hadn't expected, an unshakable determination to prove them wrong. Oregon State University's engineering campus felt like stepping into a different universe. Walking across the quad that first September morning, I passed students discussing quantum mechanics over coffee, upperclassmen wearing t-shirts from tech companies I'd only read about online, and study groups sketching complex diagrams on whiteboards visible through classroom windows. My dormitory assignment placed me with Jessica Park, a computer science major from San Francisco whose father worked at Apple and whose mother held patents in artificial intelligence. Jessica's side of our shared room featured 2 monitors, a 3D printer her parents had shipped from home, and shelves lined with programming textbooks that looked more advanced than anything I'd encountered. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. So what's your background? Jessica asked while helping me arrange my modest collection of electronics textbooks. I explained my hometown, my family's hardware store connection, and my basement workshop experiments. Jessica listened politely, but I caught her exchanging glances with our floor neighbor, David Kim, who'd overheard from the hallway. "That's really cool," David said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "I've been coding since I was 8, and interning at tech startups since sophomore year of high school. What programming languages do you know?" The honest answer was none. I'd learned basic electronics and circuit design through trial and error, online videos, and library books, but formal programming had never been accessible in Millbrook Falls. "I'm more hardware-focused," I said carefully. David nodded knowingly. "Oh, okay. Well, the first-year curriculum here is pretty programming-heavy, but I'm sure you'll pick it up." That evening, I called home to share my excitement about starting classes. My mother answered on the 3rd ring, and I could hear the television playing in the background. "How's the dorm, honey? Are you settling in all right?" I described my roommate's impressive setup and the other students' backgrounds. Instead of encouragement, my mother's voice carried familiar worry. "These sound like very serious students, Claire. Are you sure you're prepared for this level of competition?" Before I could answer, my father's voice joined the conversation. He'd picked up the kitchen extension. "Claire, there's no shame in starting with easier courses to build your confidence. Maybe some general education requirements first?" "Dad, I'm registered for the standard engineering track, calculus, physics, introduction to programming, and engineering design fundamentals." Silence stretched across the phone line. Marcus's voice suddenly joined from somewhere in the background. "Is that Claire? Tell her I looked up Oregon State's engineering dropout rates. They're pretty high for first-year students." My stomach clenched, but I tried to keep my voice steady. "I'm going to do fine." "Of course you are, sweetheart," my mother said quickly. "We just want you to have realistic expectations." Classes began the following Monday, and reality hit like cold water. Professor Williams's calculus I moved, at a pace that assumed students had completed advanced placement coursework in high school. Dr. Chen's physics for engineers required mathematical concepts I'd never encountered. Most challenging was Dr. Rodriguez's Introduction to Programming, where students were expected to understand basic coding principles within the first week. While classmates casually discussed previous experience with Java, Python, and C++, I spent evenings in the computer lab teaching myself fundamental concepts through online tutorials. My desktop computer from home, which had seemed adequate for high school projects, barely handled the software requirements for coursework. 3 weeks into the semester, I received my first exam grades. Calculus, 67%. Physics, 72%. Programming, 58%. I sat in my dorm room staring at the marked papers, feeling the weight of my family's predictions. Around me, other students discussed their scores with casual confidence. Jessica had earned a 94% in her advanced programming course. David was already working on extra credit projects. That Thursday evening, my phone rang during study hours. "Hi, Claire, it's Emma. I was just calling to check how everything's going." Her voice carried the careful tone she used when delivering bad news to patients. "It's challenging," I admitted. "Oh, honey, I was afraid of that. Marcus mentioned he'd researched the program requirements, and they sound really intense." I could hear voices in the background. Family dinner was happening without me. "Is Mom there?" "She's right here. We're all worried about you." My mother's voice replaced Emma's. "Claire, honey, how are your grades? Are you keeping up with the coursework?" The question I'd been dreading. "I'm adjusting to the pace." What does that mean exactly? I closed my eyes. My first exam scores weren't great, But it's early in the semester. Silence. Then my father's voice joining the conversation. Claire, what were your actual scores? When I reluctantly shared the numbers, the disappointment was audible even through the phone connection. Sweetheart, my mother said gently, maybe this is a sign that you should consider other options. There's no shame in recognizing when something isn't working. Marcus's voice came from somewhere nearby. Claire, those are really low scores for engineering. Most students need to maintain at least an 85% average to stay in the program. It's only been 3 weeks, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Emma returned to the phone. We love you, Claire, and we want what's best for you. Maybe you could transfer to a different major? Something that plays to your actual strengths? After hanging up, I sat alone in my room questioning everything. Maybe they were right. Maybe I'd been foolish to think a girl from a small town could compete with students who'd been preparing for engineering careers their entire lives. But something Jessica said the next morning changed my perspective entirely. You know, she mentioned while reviewing her computer science homework, I failed my first programming assignment freshman year of high school, completely bombed it. My dad was so disappointed he made me take a summer course just to catch up. I looked up from my calculus textbook. Really? Oh yeah. I was way behind everyone else in my class. Most of them had been coding since middle school, and I didn't start until I was 15. She laughed. I cried for hours after getting that first failing grade. What did you do? I worked harder than everyone else, stayed after school every day for extra help. Watched YouTube tutorials until 2 a.m., asked questions until my teachers got tired of seeing me. She shrugged. Being behind just meant I had to work smarter, not that I couldn't catch up. That conversation sparked something I hadn't felt since arriving at Oregon State: determination instead of defeat. I began spending 12-hour days in the engineering library, arriving when it opened at 7 a.m. and staying until it closed at midnight. Instead of feeling ashamed about asking questions, I visited professors during every office hour. Dr. Rodriguez, initially intimidating during lectures, turned out to be incredibly patient when working with students one-on-one. Claire, he said during our third tutoring session, you're approaching programming from a unique angle. Most students learn syntax first, but you're thinking about practical applications immediately. Is that wrong? Not at all. It's actually refreshing. You see problems that need solving, then figure out how to write code that addresses those problems. That's exactly how real engineering works. My basement workshop experience, which had seemed inadequate compared to my classmates' formal training, actually provided advantages I hadn't recognized. While other students struggled to visualize how theoretical concepts applied to real-world situations, I could immediately imagine practical implementations. During our midterm project for Engineering Design Fundamentals, teams were assigned to develop solutions for campus sustainability challenges. While most groups focused on conventional approaches like recycling programs or energy audits, I proposed designing a microgrid system that could capture and redistribute wasted energy from dormitory buildings. My teammate Sarah Chen initially seemed skeptical. That sounds really complicated, Claire. Maybe we should stick to something more straightforward? But as I sketched preliminary designs and explained the underlying principles, Sarah's engineering background helped her recognize the project's potential. Our third teammate, Alex Rodriguez, brought programming skills that complemented my hardware knowledge perfectly. We spent weeks developing calculations, creating prototypes using materials from my hometown electronics collection, and programming control systems that could automatically optimize energy distribution. The project required integrating everything I'd learned across multiple courses: calculus for efficiency calculations, physics for understanding energy transfer, and programming for automated controls. Professor Martinez, who supervised our section, stopped by our workspace during the final preparation week. This is ambitious work, she said, examining our prototype. Have you tested the energy capture rates? Alex launched into a detailed explanation of our programming algorithms, while Sarah presented our mathematical models. I demonstrated the physical prototype, showing how our system could identify energy waste patterns and redirect power to locations with higher demand. Impressive, Professor Martinez said. How did you come up with this approach? Claire designed the whole concept, Sarah said. Alex and I just helped implement her ideas. Professor Martinez looked at me with genuine interest. What inspired this particular solution? I explained my experience with solar panel efficiency projects in high school, my observations about energy waste in dormitory buildings, and my conviction that sustainable technology should be practical rather than just theoretical. Have you considered pursuing research opportunities? Professor Martinez asked. Dr. Patricia Williams in our Renewable Energy Lab is always looking for undergraduate students with hands-on experience. The suggestion seemed impossibly ambitious. Research was for advanced students, graduate-level work, something far beyond my current abilities. I don't think I'm qualified, I said honestly. Professor Martinez smiled. Claire, qualification isn't about where you start, it's about how quickly you learn and how creatively you approach problems. Based on this project, I'd say you're exactly the type of student Dr. Williams needs. That evening, I called home to share news about our project's success and the research opportunity Professor Martinez had mentioned. That sounds wonderful, honey, my mother said, though her tone remained cautious. But don't get distracted from your regular coursework. Research is probably very time-consuming. My father joined the conversation. Claire, are your grades improving? That should be your main priority right now. I shared my midterm scores. Calculus, 89%. Physics, 91%. Programming, 87%. For the first time since starting college, silence on the other end felt different. Not disappointed, but surprised. Marcus spoke first. Those are actually really good grades, Claire. I've been working hard, I said simply. Emma's voice carried genuine excitement. I'm proud of you for sticking with it. I know it's been challenging. But my father's response revealed the deeper issue. We're glad your grades are improving, but remember not to get overconfident. Sophomore year is when engineering programs really get difficult. Even success couldn't fully overcome their fundamental belief that I was destined for eventual failure. Dr. Williams agreed to meet with me the following week. Her renewable energy lab occupied an entire floor of the engineering building, filled with equipment I'd only seen in online videos. Advanced oscilloscopes, spectrum analyzers, environmental testing chambers, and prototype solar panels that looked nothing like the basic models I'd experimented with in high school. Professor Martinez tells me you have some interesting ideas about energy efficiency, Dr. Williams said as we walked through the lab space. I described my campus microgrid project, my hometown experiments with solar panel optimization, and my growing interest in practical sustainable technology applications. What interests you most about renewable energy? She asked. The gap between theoretical efficiency and real-world implementation, I said without hesitation. Most sustainable technology works perfectly in controlled laboratory conditions, but fails when deployed in actual environments with unpredictable variables. Dr. Williams stopped walking and looked at me carefully. That's exactly the problem my research team is trying to solve. We're developing adaptive control systems for renewable energy installations that can respond to changing environmental conditions automatically. She led me to a workstation where graduate students were testing solar panel arrays under simulated weather conditions. Would you be interested in working on calibration protocols for field testing? It's detail-oriented work, but it would give you exposure to real research methodology. The opportunity felt surreal. 6 months earlier, my family had questioned whether I belonged in engineering at all. Now a respected professor was inviting me to contribute to cutting-edge research. I'd love to learn more, I said. Excellent. Plan to start next semester. The work-study program provides a small stipend, and you'll gain experience that looks impressive on graduate school applications. Graduate school hadn't even occurred to me as a possibility, but Dr. Williams spoke about it as a natural next step. Walking back to my dorm that evening, I felt something I'd never experienced before: confidence in my chosen path. Not arrogance or overconfidence, but quiet certainty that I belonged exactly where I was. My phone rang as I reached my building. Emma's name appeared on the screen. Hi, Claire. I just wanted to tell you how proud I am that your grades are improving. Marcus and I were talking, and we think you might actually make it through the program. The comment stung more than my family's earlier doubts. Even their support came wrapped in surprise that I was succeeding against their expectations. Thanks, Emma. I should go study for tomorrow's exam. Of course. Don't let us keep you from your schoolwork. We know how hard you have to work to keep up. After hanging up, I realized something fundamental had shifted. My family's opinions, whether critical or supportive, no longer defined my sense of possibility. I was becoming someone they didn't yet recognize, an engineer, a researcher, a person capable of achievements they couldn't imagine. And this was only the beginning. Dr. Williams' Renewable Energy Lab became my second home during sophomore year. While other students complained about heavy course loads, I found myself energized by the combination of classroom theory and hands-on research. The calibration work she'd assigned evolved into something far more significant than either of us had anticipated. The project focused on developing adaptive algorithms for solar installations in environments with inconsistent weather patterns. Traditional solar arrays operated at fixed angles and configurations, regardless of changing conditions. Our goal was creating systems that could automatically adjust their positioning and electrical configurations to maximize energy capture throughout the day. Working alongside graduate students initially intimidated me. Chen Wei, a doctoral candidate from Beijing, had published 3 papers on photovoltaic efficiency optimization. Maria Santos, finishing her master's thesis, possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of electrical grid integration challenges. Compared to their expertise, my contributions felt elementary. But Dr. Williams had assigned me to field testing specifically because of my practical background. While Chen and Maria excelled at theoretical modeling, they'd never actually installed solar equipment outside controlled laboratory conditions. Claire, Dr. Williams said during our monthly progress meeting, "Your field data is revealing discrepancies we never caught in simulation testing. Can you explain what you're observing?" I spread my handwritten logbooks across the conference table. For 6 months, I'd been documenting performance variations at our test installation site, 30 miles east of campus. Unlike laboratory conditions, the real world presented variables that mathematical models couldn't predict. Dust accumulation patterns that varied with wind direction, moisture effects that changed based on vegetation density, and electrical interference from nearby farm equipment. The efficiency fluctuations aren't random, I explained, pointing to graphs showing energy output over time. There's a pattern, but it's based on environmental factors we're not measuring in the lab. Chen leaned forward to examine my data more closely. These variations are much larger than our theoretical predictions suggested. That's because theoretical models assume ideal conditions, I said. But ideal conditions don't exist in actual installations. Maria nodded slowly. So our laboratory testing is fundamentally flawed? Not flawed, I corrected. Just incomplete. We're designing systems for perfect environments that don't exist. Dr. Williams studied my documentation with growing excitement. Claire, what would happen if we incorporated your environmental variables into our control algorithms? The question launched us into 6 months of intensive collaboration. Chen's mathematical modeling skills, combined with Maria's electrical engineering expertise and my field observations, produced something none of us could have achieved independently: a solar array control system that automatically adapted to real-world conditions. Instead of maintaining fixed configurations, our arrays continuously monitored environmental factors and adjusted their positioning accordingly. When dust accumulation was detected, the system altered panel angles to minimize impact. When atmospheric moisture levels changed, electrical configurations automatically optimized for reduced resistance. When electromagnetic interference spiked, backup pathways activated seamlessly. Our preliminary testing showed efficiency improvements of 37% compared to traditional installations. This is publication-worthy research, Dr. Williams announced during a team meeting in March. Chen, I want you to lead the paper writing process. Maria, you'll handle the electrical engineering sections. Claire, you'll document the field testing methodology and environmental impact analysis. Publication meant submitting our research to peer-reviewed journals, where experts worldwide would evaluate our work. The prospect terrified and thrilled me simultaneously. I've never written an academic paper, I confessed to Dr. Williams after the meeting. Neither had Chen or Maria before their first publications, she replied. Academic writing is a skill like any other. You'll learn by doing it. That evening, I called home to share the publication news. My family was gathered for Sunday dinner. and I could hear the familiar clatter of dishes and conversation in the background. "That's wonderful, honey," my mother said when I explained about the research paper. "Is this like a magazine article?" "Not exactly, Mom. Academic journals are where scientists and engineers publish their research findings. It's how new discoveries get shared with the professional community." My father joined the conversation. "Will you get paid for writing this article?" "No, Dad. Academic publications aren't about money. They're about contributing to scientific knowledge and establishing professional credibility." Marcus's voice came from somewhere nearby. "Claire, be realistic about this. How many people actually read these academic papers? It sounds like a lot of work for something that won't help your career prospects." Emma picked up a different extension. "I think it's impressive that Claire's professors trust her with this kind of project. Even if it doesn't lead anywhere, it shows she's doing well in school." "It's not just schoolwork," I said, trying to keep frustration out of my voice. "This research could influence how solar energy systems are designed and implemented across the country." Silence stretched across the phone line. Finally, my mother spoke carefully. "That sounds very ambitious, sweetheart. Just remember not to get your hopes up too high about changing the world. Focus on finishing your degree first." After hanging up, I sat in my dorm room processing their reaction. Even when I achieved something genuinely significant, my family's response remained limited by their inability to imagine possibilities beyond their own experience. Jessica found me staring out the window 20 minutes later. "You look frustrated," she observed, settling into her desk chair. I explained the conversation with my family, their dismissive response to the publication opportunity, and their continued emphasis on realistic goals. "Claire," Jessica said thoughtfully, "my parents react the same way when I tell them about advanced projects. They're proud, but they don't really understand what I'm doing or why it matters. How do you deal with that?" I stopped expecting them to understand and started appreciating that they care enough to worry about me. Jessica smiled. "Besides, proving them wrong feels pretty satisfying." Spring semester brought intensified focus on completing our research paper. Chen took primary responsibility for mathematical sections, but working with him taught me academic writing conventions and research methodology standards. Maria guided my understanding of electrical engineering principles I'd never encountered in undergraduate coursework. Most challenging was learning to write for an audience of experts who would scrutinize every claim, question every conclusion, and demand rigorous proof for every assertion. My natural tendency toward practical explanations had to be supplemented with theoretical justification and comprehensive literature review. "Your field methodology section is excellent," Dr. Williams commented during one of our revision sessions. "You've documented variables that other researchers have overlooked entirely, but you need to connect your observations to existing theoretical frameworks." I spent weeks reading papers published in renewable energy journals, learning how established researchers structured their arguments and supported their conclusions. Gradually, I began understanding academic writing as a specialized form of communication with its own rules and expectations. Our final paper, titled "Adaptive Environmental Response Systems for Optimized Solar Array Performance," was submitted to the Journal of Renewable Energy Engineering in May. The peer review process would take 4 to 6 months, Dr. Williams explained, during which anonymous experts would evaluate our methodology, question our conclusions, and potentially recommend publication. "What happens if they reject it?" I asked. "Then we revise based on their feedback and submit elsewhere," she said matter-of-factly. Publication is rarely achieved on the first attempt. Most successful papers go through multiple revision cycles. Summer break arrived with a mixture of anticipation and uncertainty. I returned to Millbrook Falls carrying copies of our submitted paper, excited to share tangible evidence of my academic progress. My family gathered in the living room as I explained our research findings. I'd prepared a simplified presentation, avoiding technical jargon while highlighting the practical implications of our work. "So these solar panels move by themselves?" Emma asked, studying the diagrams I'd drawn. "The positioning systems automatically adjust based on environmental conditions," I explained. "Instead of staying in fixed positions, they respond to changing circumstances throughout the day." Marcus examined our efficiency data charts. "These improvement percentages seem really high. Are you sure the testing was accurate?" We conducted 6 months of controlled field testing with multiple verification protocols, I said. Every measurement was double-checked and documented. My father leaned back in his chair, adopting his familiar skeptical expression. Claire, this all sounds very theoretical. Has anyone actually built these systems for real use? That's the point of publication, Dad. Our research provides the foundation for other engineers to develop commercial applications. My mother patted my hand sympathetically. It's wonderful that you're doing so well in school, honey. But don't get too attached to these projects. Academic work and real-world careers are often very different things. Their response stung, but I was beginning to recognize a pattern. My family's limitations weren't about me or my capabilities. They reflected their own restricted understanding of possibilities beyond their direct experience. July brought unexpected news. Dr. Williams called while I was helping my father reorganize inventory at the hardware store. Claire, I have excellent news about our paper, she said, barely containing her excitement. The peer reviewers recommended publication with minor revisions. You're about to become a published researcher. The hardware store suddenly felt surreal. Standing among shelves of screws and paintbrushes, discussing academic publication with one of the country's leading renewable energy experts, I experienced a profound sense of displacement. What kind of revisions do they want? I asked. Mostly clarification of methodology and expansion of the literature review section. Nothing that changes our fundamental conclusions. We should be able to complete the revisions within 2 weeks. After hanging up, I stood motionless in the store's familiar environment. The smell of fertilizer and motor oil, the organized rows of practical tools, the steady rhythm of my father's customer interactions. Everything felt simultaneously comforting and confining. My father approached carrying a clipboard of inventory sheets. Everything all right? You look like you've seen a ghost. That was Dr. Williams. Our research paper has been accepted for publication. He set down his clipboard and looked at me with genuine curiosity. What does that mean exactly? For the first time, I saw past his skepticism to the underlying pride he struggled to express. It means scientists and engineers around the world will read our research and potentially use our findings in their own work. He paused, searching for appropriate words. That's quite an accomplishment, Claire. It was the closest thing to unqualified approval he'd ever expressed about my engineering pursuits. That evening at dinner, I shared the publication news with the entire family. Their reactions revealed the gradual shift in how they perceived my academic path. So you'll actually be in a magazine that professionals read? Emma asked. A scientific journal, I corrected. But yes, it will be available to researchers worldwide. Marcus studied me with new interest. How many undergraduate students get published in these journals? Not many, I admitted. Dr. Williams says it's unusual for sophomore students to contribute to peer-reviewed research. My mother's expression mixed pride with persistent worry. This is wonderful, honey, but don't let success go to your head. You still have 2 more years of school to complete. Even their cautious support represented progress. 6 months earlier, they'd questioned whether I belonged in engineering at all. Now they were acknowledging achievements they couldn't fully comprehend, but were beginning to respect. The paper appeared in print 3 months later. Seeing my name listed as co-author alongside Chen, Maria, and Dr. Williams felt surreal. The research we'd conducted in Oregon was now part of the permanent scientific record, available to anyone studying renewable energy optimization. More importantly, our work was already influencing other researchers. Dr. Williams forwarded emails from laboratories in Germany, Japan, and Massachusetts requesting additional details about our field testing protocols. Our environmental adaptation concepts were being incorporated into new research projects across multiple continents. Claire, Dr. Williams said during our first meeting of junior year, I'm recommending you for the National Science Foundation's Undergraduate Research Fellowship Program. Recipients receive funding to conduct independent research projects and often go on to prestigious graduate programs. The suggestion seemed impossibly ambitious. NSF fellowships were among the most competitive awards available to undergraduate students. Do you really think I'm qualified? Your publication record and research experience make you an excellent candidate, she said. More importantly, you have the kind of practical insight that federal agencies want to support. That evening, I called home to discuss the fellowship opportunity. My family's reaction would determine whether I felt confident enough to submit the application. That sounds very competitive, my mother said after I explained the program details. Are you sure you want to set yourself up for potential disappointment? Marcus joined the conversation. Claire, these national programs probably attract applicants from schools like MIT and Stanford. Students who've been doing research since freshman year. I have been doing research, I said quietly. But this is different, Emma added. This is competing against the best students in the entire country. Their familiar pattern of doubt triggered something unexpected, not discouragement, but fierce determination. You're right, I said, it is competitive. And I'm going to apply anyway. For the first time, their skepticism strengthened, rather than weakened my resolve. I was no longer seeking their approval or permission. I was informing them of decisions I'd already made based on confidence they couldn't yet recognize, but were gradually learning to respect. The NSF fellowship application required 3 months of intensive preparation. Unlike undergraduate coursework, which followed predictable patterns and clear expectations, crafting a competitive research proposal demanded skills I'd never developed: articulating vision, defending methodology, and positioning my work within broader scientific contexts. Dr. Williams connected me with Dr. Sarah Kim, a former NSF fellow who now directed the university's Graduate Student Success Center. Our first meeting took place in her office overlooking the engineering quad, where I'd walked nervously as a freshman just 2 years earlier. Tell me about your research interests, Dr. Kim said, settling behind a desk covered with grant applications and academic journals. I launched into a detailed explanation of solar panel optimization, environmental adaptation algorithms, and field testing protocols. After 10 minutes of technical exposition, Dr. Kim raised her hand gently. Claire, that's an excellent summary of what you've done. But fellowship applications aren't about past accomplishments, they're about future potential. What problems do you want to solve that haven't been solved yet? The question forced me to think beyond incremental improvements to existing technology. What fundamental challenges in renewable energy required completely new approaches? Energy storage integration, I said after a long pause. Current solar installations can optimize energy capture, but they can't effectively store excess production for later use. Most residential and commercial systems waste significant amounts of generated power because storage solutions are too expensive or technically complex for widespread implementation. Dr. Kim leaned forward with interest. Now we're getting somewhere. How would you approach that challenge? Over the following weeks, I developed a research proposal focused on developing affordable, user-friendly energy storage systems that could seamlessly integrate with adaptive solar arrays. The concept combined my experience with field testing, Dr. Williams' renewable energy expertise, and emerging battery technologies being developed by other research teams. The proposal outlined a 3-year research timeline. First year focused on storage system design and prototype development, second year dedicated to integration testing with existing solar installations, and third year examining scalability for different residential and commercial applications. Writing the proposal required learning an entirely new vocabulary of academic persuasion. I studied successful fellowship applications, analyzed grant writing guides, and attended workshops on research communication. Most challenging was learning to balance ambitious vision with realistic methodology. Your initial draft reads like a wish list, Dr. Kim commented during one of our revision sessions. Fellowship reviewers want to see specific, measurable objectives with clear timelines and defined success metrics. I spent weeks refining each section, transforming broad concepts into precise research questions with detailed experimental protocols. The personal statement proved especially difficult, requiring me to articulate not just what I planned to accomplish, but why my particular background and perspective made me uniquely qualified to tackle these challenges. Remember, Dr. Kim advised, you're not just applying for funding, you're asking the scientific community to invest in your potential as a future research leader. November brought application deadlines and mounting anxiety. I submitted my NSF proposal on a gray Tuesday morning, then immediately began second-guessing every word choice and methodological decision. Meanwhile, senior year course selection demanded decisions about academic focus and career direction. Dr. Williams recommended advanced coursework in energy systems design and electrical grid integration. My academic advisor suggested adding economics courses to understand market factors affecting renewable energy adoption. "Claire," Dr. Williams said during one of our regular meetings, "have you considered graduate school applications? Your research experience and publication record make you competitive for top-tier programs." Graduate school represented another leap beyond my family's comprehension. They'd gradually accepted my undergraduate success, but doctoral education belonged to a world they couldn't envision me inhabiting. "Which schools should I consider?" I asked. "Stanford, MIT, and Berkeley have excellent renewable energy programs. Carnegie Mellon's engineering department is doing innovative work in smart grid technology. University of Colorado Boulder specializes in environmental applications." Each name felt like reaching toward impossibly distant goals. These were institutions that attracted students who'd been groomed for academic excellence since childhood, whose parents held advanced degrees and understood graduate school culture instinctively. "Do you think I'm qualified for programs like that?" Dr. Williams set down her pen and looked at me seriously. "Claire, you've accomplished more in 3 years than many graduate students achieve in their entire doctoral programs. You have research experience, publication credits, and practical knowledge that most applicants lack entirely." December brought news that would reshape my understanding of what was possible. Dr. Kim called while I was reviewing applications for graduate programs, her voice barely containing excitement. "Claire, I have extraordinary news about your NSF application. You've been selected as a finalist. The final review committee wants to interview you in Washington, D.C. next month." The phone slipped from my hand. NSF fellowship finalists represented the top 1% of applicants nationwide. Students from Harvard, MIT, Stanford, and Caltech competed for fewer than 200 awards across all engineering disciplines. "Are you sure they meant me?" I asked after retrieving the phone. "Absolutely certain. Congratulations, Claire. This is a tremendous achievement, regardless of the final outcome." That evening, I sat in my dorm room staring at the official email notification. The interview would take place at NSF headquarters in Alexandria, Virginia. I'd present my research proposal to a panel of leading scientists and engineers, defending my methodology and articulating my vision for advancing renewable energy technology. Calling home to share the news felt both exciting and daunting. My family's reactions would either bolster my confidence or amplify my anxiety about competing at the national level. "Hello, honey," my mother answered on the second ring. "How are classes going?" "Mom, I have incredible news about the fellowship I applied for. I've been selected as a finalist for the National Science Foundation Award." Silence stretched across the connection. "What does that mean exactly?" she asked carefully. I explained the selection process, the interview requirements, and the significance of being chosen from thousands of applicants nationwide. My father joined the conversation. "This sounds very prestigious, Claire, but what happens if you don't win the final award? Will that hurt your chances for other opportunities?" Before I could respond, Marcus spoke from somewhere in the background. "Claire, I looked up this NSF program online. The competition includes students from every major university in the country. Students who've been doing research for years longer than you have." Emma picked up another extension. "I'm proud that you made it this far, but don't get your hopes up too high about actually winning. The disappointment would be devastating." Their familiar pattern of qualified support mixed with protective pessimism no longer surprised me, but something fundamental had shifted in how their doubts affected my self-perception. "I understand this is competitive," I said calmly, "and I'm going to prepare thoroughly and do my best at the interview." "Of course you will, sweetheart," my mother said quickly. "We just want you to have realistic expectations." "I do have realistic expectations," I replied. "I expect to represent my research competently and professionally. Whether I win or not, I've already achieved something significant by reaching the finalist stage." After hanging up, I realized their skepticism no longer undermined my confidence. Instead, it highlighted how far I'd traveled from the uncertain freshman who'd arrived at Oregon State 3 years earlier. January preparation for the NSF interview consumed every spare moment. Dr. Williams arranged practice sessions with faculty members who grilled me on technical details, methodological choices, and broader implications of my proposed research. Remember, Dr. Williams coached, the interview panel wants to assess not just your current knowledge, but your potential for growth and leadership in your field. They're investing in the scientist you'll become, not just the student you are today. I practiced my presentation dozens of times, refining explanations until I could discuss complex concepts clearly and concisely. Dr. Kim helped me prepare for likely questions about the research timeline, budget considerations, and potential challenges. The key is demonstrating both technical competence and broader vision, she advised. Show them you understand the scientific details, but also articulate why your work matters for society. The trip to Washington, D.C. felt surreal. Flying across the country to discuss my research with leading scientists seemed impossibly removed from my origins in Millbrook Falls. Yet walking through the NSF building, surrounded by other finalist candidates, I felt surprisingly confident. My interview took place on a Tuesday morning in a conference room overlooking the Potomac River. 5 panelists sat across from me. Dr. Jennifer Chen from the Department of Energy, Dr. Michael Rodriguez from Stanford's engineering faculty, Dr. Sarah Williams from IBM Research, Dr. David Kim from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, and Dr. Patricia Martinez from the NSF Program Office. Please begin with a 10-minute overview of your proposed research, Dr. Martinez said. I launched into my presentation, explaining the energy storage integration challenges I plan to address, the methodology I'd developed for testing storage solutions, and the potential impact on renewable energy adoption rates. The panelists listened intently, occasionally taking notes, but allowing me to complete my overview without interruption. Interesting approach, Dr. Chen said when I finished. How do you plan to address the cost barriers that have prevented widespread storage adoption previously? The question led to 15 minutes of detailed discussion about manufacturing processes, material selection, and economic modeling. Dr. Rodriguez challenged my timeline assumptions, while Dr. Williams questioned whether my testing protocols would scale effectively to commercial applications. Rather than feeling intimidated, I found myself energized by their expertise and genuine interest in my work. These weren't skeptics trying to undermine my confidence, but fellow researchers pushing me to refine and strengthen my ideas. One final question, Dr. Kim said as our session concluded. Where do you see yourself professionally in 10 years? Leading a research team that develops practical, affordable renewable energy solutions for communities that have been underserved by current technology, I answered without hesitation. I want to bridge the gap between laboratory innovations and real-world implementation. Flying back to Oregon, I felt profound satisfaction, regardless of the interview outcome. I'd held my own in conversation with leading experts, defended my research competently, and articulated a clear vision for my professional future. 3 weeks later, Dr. Martinez called with news that would change everything. Claire, I'm delighted to inform you that you've been selected to receive the National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship. Congratulations on this outstanding achievement. The award provided 3 years of graduate school funding, including full tuition support and an annual living stipend. More importantly, it represented recognition from the scientific community that my research potential warranted significant investment. I called home immediately after hanging up with Dr. Martinez. Mom, I won the NSF Fellowship. I'm receiving the award. This time, the silence felt different. Not skeptical or cautious, but stunned. Claire, my mother said slowly, that's incredible. We're so proud of you. My father joined the conversation, his voice carrying unfamiliar excitement. Honey, this is a major accomplishment. How many students receive these awards nationwide? About 200 across all science and engineering fields, I said. Marcus spoke from the background, and for the first time his tone held genuine admiration rather than protective skepticism. Claire, that's amazing. You beat students from every top university in the country. Emma's voice carried pure joy. I always knew you were special, but this proves it to everyone else too. Saya Evers, my mother began crying softly. We're sorry we didn't believe in you sooner, sweetheart. We just didn't understand what was possible. You don't need to apologize, I said honestly. You supported me in the way you knew how. That's what mattered. April brought graduate school acceptance letters from Stanford, MIT, Berkeley, and Carnegie Mellon. Each offer included additional funding and research opportunities that would complement my NSF fellowship perfectly. Choosing between prestigious programs required careful consideration of research fit, advisor expertise, and institutional culture. I visited each campus, meeting with potential supervisors and touring laboratory facilities that would shape my doctoral education. Stanford's Renewable Energy Lab impressed me with its cutting-edge equipment and collaborative atmosphere. MIT offered unparalleled resources and access to industry partnerships. Berkeley's environmental focus aligned perfectly with my interests in sustainable technology applications. But Carnegie Mellon's Smart Grid research program offered something unique: the opportunity to work with Dr. Lisa Chang, whose team was developing exactly the kind of integrated energy systems I hoped to advance through my NSF research. Claire, Dr. Chang said during my campus visit, your background in field testing and practical applications would complement our theoretical modeling expertise perfectly. We need researchers who understand real-world implementation challenges. The decision crystallized during my final conversation with Dr. Williams before graduation. Any of these programs would provide excellent opportunities, she said. But Carnegie Mellon offers the best match between your research interests and available resources. Dr. Chang's reputation in smart grid technology is exceptional. May graduation day arrived with unexpected emotional intensity. Walking across the stage to receive my degree, I searched the audience for my family's faces. They were there in the front section, holding a banner Emma had made featuring my name and NSF Fellow in bold letters. After the ceremony, we gathered for photos outside the engineering building, where I'd spent countless hours conducting research and developing the skills that would define my career. We owe you an apology, my father said as we posed for pictures. We let our own limitations blind us to your potential. You proved us wrong about everything. You didn't prove us wrong, my mother corrected. You showed us possibilities we couldn't imagine. There's a difference. Marcus shook his head in amazement. Claire, 3 years ago I thought you were being unrealistic about engineering. Now you're heading to one of the best graduate programs in the country with a prestigious fellowship. I was completely wrong about your capabilities. Emma hugged me tightly. I'm proud to be your sister, and I'm sorry I ever suggested you should choose something easier. Standing with my family in the Oregon sunshine, holding my engineering degree and preparing for doctoral education at Carnegie Mellon, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this moment. Their initial skepticism hadn't been malicious or unsupportive. It had reflected their own limited experience with possibilities beyond traditional career paths. They'd wanted to protect me from disappointment in a world they didn't understand. But their doubts had also motivated something they hadn't expected: an unshakable determination to prove that potential couldn't be measured by family background, hometown limitations, or conventional expectations. Now, as we celebrated achievements they could finally comprehend and appreciate, I understood that their gradual shift from skepticism to pride mirrored my own evolution from uncertain freshman to confident researcher. The girl who'd arrived at Oregon State questioning whether she belonged in engineering had become a young woman preparing to pursue doctoral education at one of the nation's premier research institutions. And this transformation was just the beginning. That evening, as I packed my belongings for the move to Pittsburgh, my phone rang. Dr. Williams's name appeared on the screen. Claire, I wanted to call before you leave for Carnegie Mellon. Your research proposal has caught the attention of Dr. Robert Chen at the Department of Energy. He's interested in discussing potential collaboration opportunities for your graduate work. The possibility of contributing to national energy policy research represented another leap beyond anything I'd previously imagined. What kind of collaboration? I asked. Pilot programs for implementing adaptive energy storage systems in rural communities. Exactly the kind of practical applications you've always been passionate about. Hanging up, I realized my story was transforming from one of personal achievement to one of potentially meaningful impact on communities like Millbrook Falls, where practical renewable energy solutions could make profound differences in people's lives. The basement workshop where I'd first discovered my passion for electronics had led to opportunities I couldn't have conceived as a curious teenager tinkering with broken radios. Tomorrow, I would begin the next chapter of a journey that started with family doubts and childhood curiosity, evolved through academic achievement and research recognition, and was now pointing toward possibilities that extended far beyond personal success. Standing in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by boxes containing the accumulated knowledge and experience of my undergraduate years, I felt profound gratitude for the path I'd chosen despite the obstacles and skepticism I'd encountered. But mostly I felt excitement about the challenges and discoveries that lay ahead. Now, standing in the East Room of the White House, wearing a borrowed navy dress that didn't quite fit right, I couldn't stop my hands from trembling as President Martinez approached the podium. The crystal chandeliers cast warm light across the faces of distinguished guests, cabinet members, and media representatives who had gathered for what the press secretary called a ceremony recognizing extraordinary contributions to American innovation. My parents sat in the third row, their faces reflecting a mixture of pride and bewilderment that their daughter from small-town Oregon was about to receive the Presidential Medal for Innovation in Renewable Energy Technology. The journey from that uncertain freshman to this moment had taken 8 years, 3 degrees, and the development of energy storage technology that was now being implemented in rural communities across 47 states. But the real transformation hadn't been academic or professional. It had been learning to believe in possibilities that extend far beyond the limitations others place on our potential, and discovering that the greatest achievements often begin with the courage to pursue dreams that seem impossible to everyone except ourselves. As President Martinez began reading the citation describing my contributions to sustainable energy development, I thought about the girl who'd once sat in a basement workshop, surrounded by broken electronics and unlimited curiosity. She'd known something the adults around her couldn't see: that potential isn't determined by where you start, but by how far you're willing to travel toward the person you're meant to become. And sometimes, that journey leads to places no one could have imagined. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.